I have so many mixed feelings about this book, and we're going to talk about them. Hello, and welcome to my channel. In this video, we are going to be talking about The Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett. And yeah, I'm calling this a let's talk about instead of a review, just because people get grumpy sometimes if I spend more time just like giving different thoughts, opinions, ranting, whatever. And this is a book that I have a lot of really conflicting thoughts on, and I'm curious because I know this is a beloved book. As I've been told by some people who are fans of it too, it was once like ranked one of the best books of all time in general, and so like it's very popular. I mean, heck, this copy that I have has an Oprah's Book Club sticker, so popular book, very well known. And you usually only hear positive things about it. Now, this could be, I've seen other series or books or whatever where people who don't like it don't tend to talk about it as much, but I didn't feel like I'd ever really seen negatives about this. And so when I ended up having such conflicting feelings, I was curious. And there are other people out there, but we're going to kind of talk through it here. And The Pillars of the Earth, if you're not familiar for whatever reason or haven't read it, the base setup of this is a multi-generational story that is focused around the building of a church, and we see different characters and different generations of characters who are all involved because it's takes a really long time, years, decades to really do this type of thing. And so that's the framing of this is we're going to be in for the long haul here. We start with these characters and get things started, and there's all the things that happen along the way. And I think at its core, that part of the premise works really well. And that's the best part about this is, and I know how that sounds, like the best part's exactly what he was trying to do as an author. But I think those elements work well. The building of the church, the kind of the overall thing, the telling the story over time. I think those elements do work really well. A lot of my complaints get more so on the character side and the way that some of them are set up. Now, before I take everybody off, I will just say that if you are a fan of this and you've not read Guy Gavriel Kay, go read Guy Gavriel Kay immediately because my first thought, and a thought I had many times throughout, is that Guy Gavriel Kay could have written this book in half the page count and made it like 10 times better, in my opinion. And so biggest thing is I didn't hate this. Like I said, I had a lot of problems. It has some really high highs, but it also has some really low lows for me. So I was kind of mixed. But again, if you like, especially because Guy Gavriel Kay technically is put into fantasy, but he writes historical fiction that has just a wee bit of fantastical elements in it. And it's just he is so amazing at writing that, and his characters tend to be extremely strong too, which is why I ran into some issues here. So yeah, can't recommend that enough. But anyway, getting back to Pillars, and let's talk about it because I mentioned again I think the multi generational thing, the time, the actual building of the church, the way that Ken Follett manages to include quite a lot about like building and construction and masonry and everything, all of these elements, and that they don't it doesn't seem to really be boring or to come off that way. And that's a hard thing to do, is to include actual stuff like that and have it be interesting. And overall, just there is something about Ken Follett as an author. I found this pretty just effortless going through the writing style. Like I felt really engaged. I was just getting through this completely effortlessly, and I was reading this at a time that I was kind of feeling a little bit slumpy with some of my other reads, even though I was enjoying them. So it's funny that wow, I ended up very mixed on this. Getting through it was just super easy. So it's extremely readable, and that is hard to do in a book this size. This is super long. There's a ton in it. There's a lot of detail, and yet it always felt very engaging, very easy to read, and just kept me really going there. So I do have to say that is really great, and I think Ken Follett, based on that, has some definite strengths as an author. But again, I've commented a few times characters, but specifically the big thing that I'm going to talk about here is the women characters in this, which are some of the worst I've ever read. Full stop. And I'm definitely going to get into that more, but I legitimately just couldn't believe some of the things that would happen here because the characters in this in general are at times a little bit flat. You're spending a lot of time with them, but also because of the fact that it's a story told well over time, we're focusing more on the story that's actually happening and like the church and the big picture than the individual circumstances of the characters. So sometimes we'll just sort of check in after a while, and I think that's part of where I felt a little distance from the characters. But it's the female characters that just were bad, in my opinion. We're going to talk a little bit more specifics here, and so this is where I'll kind of warn when I get into sort of spoilery territory, but just being more general first. The women in the Pillars of the Earth are either exist as a victim, a sex object, sometimes both, or just like general harpy woman. Like those are the three options if you're a woman. If you don't fall into one of those categories, you're not spending more than maybe a page in this book. That's all what they are. We have some that are the harpy woman. The harpy woman, of course, being described as extremely ugly naturally as well. But then any other woman that's here is just a sex object or a victim or both, and that is it. They also don't have any like real identity or agency or anything outside of their connection to male characters. Even the quote unquote main female character, which we're going to talk about, does not really have, like, there's nothing to her outside of when she's directly connected to male characters. And I do want to get into more detail there, so that's where I'll get a little bit spoilery here for just a minute. This is going to be more mild and is specifically starts with concerning something that happens pretty early, although it happens quite a lot. But the other thing that I will note is the Tip here is one of our main villains. Just goes around murdering people and assaulting women, and that's his whole thing. And we see that lots of times on screen uh, throughout the book, and again and again. And so that's something that I'll call out, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that here too. I'm trying to not get in trouble for saying words I'm not allowed to say on YouTube. But so talking about the quote unquote main female character, the lady Aliena, and she starts off as, you know, a young girl here, and kind of the impetus for her character is she does not want to marry the person that their marriage has been arranged because she doesn't like him, and he ends up being one of our main villains. And but then stuff happens, and she and her brother end up kind of like cast down, and their father's arrested, and so they're kind of trying to survive. Now we don't follow that story at all. The what do you do for quite a while. They are just trying to get by and do the thing. We don't follow that story whatsoever. We only get a POV from the lady Aliena after she's assaulted by the main villain. Immediately after that, suddenly, because now she's a victim and directly tied to a male character as a victim, suddenly we get a POV. And I really wish I was kidding or exaggerating here, but quite literally, so we follow her on her victim arc, and as soon as she's no longer a victim and starts becoming more successful, we stop following her completely until it's time for her to be a victim again. We don't get her POV at all during her success. Specifically, we get her POV again after more bad stuff happens to her and she becomes a victim. And then again, we just completely ignore her until later. Then she is a sex object for another character as well. And that's pretty much what we do here. And there are other female characters again that just basically exist there. I guess there is one female character that I suppose would just be kind of set dressing, because they never have any sort of personality or really any depth added to them whatsoever. Ironically, they're literally just like attached to a male character, and that's their whole thing, is they just always stayed attached to a male character and just are kind of around. So I kind of forgot about that, but it does further prove my point here. But that's what we get. And, you know, besides the fact that it's just, I mean, it's really poor writing of female characters in general, where there's no real depth. But it's just like, I've read some bad female characters. Granted, I'm a fantasy reader primarily, and I've read a lot of older fantasy and newer fantasy, but you see it a lot in some older fantasy where it's just the female characters are horrendous, and that's kind of just a known thing. And some people think that's what all fantasy's like, and there's lots of examples where it's not. But that's why I say that's the worst that I've read. It's just, it seemed like Ken Follett just had no idea that female characters could exist in their own right and have agency and like do anything other than being directly tied to a male character. And it's because we focus more on Aliena's brother, because then that becomes a male character that she's tied to in some ways as well. But again, it's not even just that we have these things. It'd be one thing if like, oh, these terrible things happen and they're somewhat addressed, but it's like we specifically only ever look at these characters for bad things happening. And that's what you can't, if again, if there's going to be, anything else, then we just will not have that POV, and we'll say like, oh, these things happened any other time. And it just like, I kept getting more and more irritated at it, and just really, really annoyed. But this goes on. This isn't like it gets better either, because literally, even toward the very end of the book, we have a female character who's just monologuing about how empty her life was before male love interest. Just everything, even though she was really successful and independent, like, oh my gosh, her life was just so empty before. And it's just like literally monologuing about her life is literally empty without male love interest. What does male love interest monologue about? Her boobs. Just monologues about them and thinks about them over the years. And it's just like the whole relationship just again seems on her being a sexual object to him. And that's it. Basically, is the whole thing. And it's just like the other, because I know somebody's going to bring up, she does have another sort of character arc, but again, it is literally directly tied to a male character. And that's just what it is. Like the male characters do their own thing, they have their own arcs. And there is some of the stuff where, like, male characters, we don't follow them constantly with their POVs and when they're doing other stuff as well. But it's just they're allowed to also exist and impact things other than just being directly tied to male characters. And that's just something that, like, I really couldn't get past. And it really knocked this one down for me in a big way. I think that if those issues weren't there, or were, even if they were just not quite as glaringly bad, this would have been a book I probably would have enjoyed a lot more. But it's just when things like this keep happening, I just got to be like, are you kidding me? We're doing this again. It just started to really grate on me. And so while like there are some good things, and with some elements at the ending too, I thought were really well done. And again, this has high highs. I liked some of the other elements of seeing these just generations and what's happening, and how things change over time. But that really, really just brought down my enjoyment. The other big thing that's character related is the villains. And I mentioned that we have one main villain who just goes around. His POV is pretty much exclusively murdering or assaulting women. And it happens a lot. And it happens on page pretty much every time. I'm sure there's probably countless times that it happened off page too, but it's pretty much every single time we have him on page, or at least it felt like it was pretty much every time. That's what's happening. And again, just felt like it was not necessary at all. Like, why do we need to keep doing this again and again? And there is literally an assault scene that then is played off for laughs. And you can't tell me that it's not. Absolutely is played off for laughs and supposed to be a funny scene. And no, I'm sorry, that's not okay. That's just why, I don't know why you would think that is okay to do. And it's just like, oh, because he's this character. But no, it was totally not okay. And like, again, that it's bad enough having all of that, but then to try and also play one off for laughs again is just, this is where I knew I was going to get ranty. It's just absolutely ridiculous. And it's where, again, I'm just surprised that I've not heard more negative things about this book, because all of these things, and this is where, again, like I tried to talk about some of the good before getting to the bad, but all these things are just like, for me, I just glaring issues and things I absolutely could not look past at all. And so yeah, that's kind of our villain there. Who it's also the him and the main character that I feel like people latch on to mostly is our main monk character, who was, I think, by far the best character for me to kind of follow along with, and I liked his arcs with just trying to get his church built. But we have literally like half the interactions here are villain does something villainy and monk goes, you're gonna go to hell, and then villain gets really scared because he's scared of that, but then he just goes and like asks for forgiveness to somebody else, and then he's fine, and we just rinse repeat. And like there are several times where like that's how melodramatic it is, where the monk goes, you're going to hell, and he's like, oh no, not hell. And it's a little bit silly to that part. Our other villain is another member of the church, though, who is just very determined to go against Philip, our kind of main character monk, because he's mad that he did something he didn't like. And it's just, this whole thing is trying to be sneaky and get as much power as possible, and just completely go against. And it did just both felt like cartoonish. Him in a kind of a mustache twirly way, and the other guy just is being a little bit two-dimensional, everything with it. And it's that kind of just continues throughout. It's like, oh, things are going pretty well, but then our villains come in to just do some villainy, and then it's like, oh, drat, now we have setbacks. And it just did really, I mean, I said cartoonish, and I feel like that's the right word because the villains really just ended up coming off as quite cartoonish to me at times. And so it's again where it's like sometimes things are like, I'm actually liking this. Again, this was very easy to read for the most part, barring when you get to specific scenes and types of things there. But so it feels like, oh, it's going so well. Then again, you input one of those two things, the really bad writing of female characters and the situations that we see there, or the just over the top villains, and it took me out every single time. Every time I was starting to enjoy myself more with some of the things, like we get some really interesting stuff too. And again, like Fallout does a really good job of making like the masonry and the process and kind of just seeing all of the things that would have gone into trying to do something like this to build the new like big cathedral. And it makes you think too. You see images of all of these massive, churches, cathedrals all across Europe, and the amount of time and effort and energy it would have taken to build those. So it really does capture that in a great way, and it'll go well for a while until you start to get to all of the things that just really brought it down for me. And so this is definitely, I haven't had a book I've been more mixed about in a long time. I think I can't even think of another specific example. But that's where I ultimately, while this was super easy to get through despite the length, just the amount of things that irritated me brought it down for me. And I ended up giving this 3 stars. I couldn't give it more than three, but I feel like it has enough good things that feels fitting. But again, I really am curious. So definitely let me know in the comments if I've read this and whether you agree or disagree with it, with any of my negatives or positives or whatever. I'm just kind of curious because I've heard it talked about so little. And I was ranting about this to a friend, and they said another mutual person that we both know also didn't like it for some similar reasons. And I thought that was really funny because I have very different tastes than that person, but apparently we agree here. But yeah, let me know because I just am. I don't know. I feel like I'm somewhat alone here in thinking this, and I haven't like dug through a bunch of reviews again. I'm sure there's other people, but I am really surprised I haven't seen more stuff like this mentioned. But really, there you have it. Those are my thoughts, I think, on Pillars of the Earth. I ended up not having a chance to film this until well after finishing. So I probably would have been a bit more rantier had I done this sooner after as well. But it's again, I didn't even quite call this a review because this is more just me talking about things, good and bad, and part of it. But just framing it, me getting it there because again, I had a lot of thoughts on this one and just kind of wanted to talk it over. But really curious to see what you think about this. Like I said, agree, disagree. Let me know. I imagine there'll be a lot of strong opinions here. I was going back and forth with a friend of mine who loves this book too, and we were giving each other all kinds of heck about it. So I imagine there'll be some strong opinions, but I'm just really curious because it's one of those books that I heard pretty much nothing but praise for. So I'm curious as to if anybody else is in the same boat, and it's like, oh yeah, I just never talk about it. So let me know. That's it for this one, though. Make sure to give the video a like if you enjoyed it. Check the links in the description, as always, for the Patreon if you want to support what I do, as well as the Wizard of the Enclave Discord if you want to chat books, whether this book, other books, really anything at all. It's a lot of fun. We'd love to have you. And, of course, if you enjoy my content, make sure to subscribe.